Hey guys, welcome back to Say Mojo Homestead. I'm Cass and this is Jeremy, and we are going to talk about tea.
So we did a video a couple weeks ago, our rainy day tea chat.
Yes.
And in that we got a lot of response with questions.
Yeah.
And so we posted out there on several of our social media places and asked you guys for questions like, what is it that you want to know about herbal teas or what we do with ours and all of that. So we got a lot of stuff to do in the garden this weekend. So while we work in the garden, we're going to answer those questions.
If there is something else that you want to know about herbal teas or growing your own herbal teas, definitely ask a question in the comments below. We love to chat with you guys and kind of talk about that kind of stuff. So let's get started.
Yes.
I am going to be planting okra. My friend Jess got me some purple okra, so I want to plant those on this side of the garden. And then our friends Stan and Dina got us some heirloom would-be white okra, which I'm really excited about. I'm excited about both of them, but I don't want them to cross-pollinate. So I'm putting them as far away from each other as I can so that we can enjoy both types of okra, but not mix them. And while we go over there and we're planting okra, what are you gonna plant?
I'm gonna plant some watermelon.
You are gonna plant some watermelon. Our friends Stan and Dina have been really giving, and they're just really giving people. And they gave Josiah, when he went to their farm one day, a giant watermelon. And we saved some of those seeds. So these seeds are also going to be from Stan and Dina's farm. And they're gonna be growing with our would-be white okra on the other side of the garden.
So these are my seeds?
Those are your seeds, yes. Are you excited to plant them? Okay, so let's get planting and talk about steeping times with tea. Tea leaves have various steeping times, and the most basic way to explain it, and the easiest way to remember it, is the more delicate the leaf, the less time the tea needs to steep. Things like your mints and lemon balm or your lemon verbena, they're a really light leaf and they don't take as long to steep in the tea. Now something like lemongrass that's really coarse, or even if you forage and you do like a pine needle tea, things that are thicker need to have a longer steeping period. Lemongrass takes a minimum 10 minutes. If you want just the flavor, 10 minutes. If you want the full medicinal value of like ginger or lemongrass, you could do 15 to 20 minutes and be fine. If you're steeping a flower like a lavender flower, or if you forage and you want to do like a crimson clover flower, flowers don't take long before they get bitter. So it's just a couple of minutes of steep time and then they're good. If you want recipes, we have that in our other video that we did last week, and you can check out all those details.
All right, next thing on the garden agenda is planting some bush beans. And we've got our binding beans that are going up this teepee, but I also want to take advantage and get some bush beans in there. So the next thing that we want to talk about with teas is, where do you start? Basically, like, how do you start growing them? Do you start with seeds? Do you get starts? Do you use cuttings? And the answer to that is yes, to all of it. It really depends on, one, what it is, and two, how long do you want to wait? You know, we have never tried it from seed, so I am just going off from what I understand. Would be things like some of your flowers, flower teas and stuff like that you want to go with. I've heard mint can be fairly easy to start from seed, anything in that family. Basil, you could start basil from seed, but with any of these, just keep in mind, like, there is a time frame and some preparation time that you're gonna have to plan for and wait for to get them up to big enough to even start harvesting them. So what we've always done is bought plant starts. Basically just went and bought the plants. Most of these tea things are pretty prolific growers and can multiply, some more aggressively than others, meaning like mint. You can divide them and help that process go faster if you want to, or you just go buy however many plants you want and go ahead and start with a lot. You can do cuttings. Mint are pretty easy to do a cutting from. Especially if you can know somebody that already has mint, just go dig it up, or it'll root really, really easy. Agastache is another one that I've heard does pretty good with cuttings. I would think lemon balm, you probably could, it's more of a woody type plant, so I would think that you could probably do a cutting from that. If you know people that are already growing these, ask if they would share it. These things can be fairly prolific and easy to split and divide and share. So there are definitely ways that you can do that, which would be a cheaper option, kind of like the seeds, but you're starting with a plant. So, you know, it's just that much easier.
I am going to harvest these cabbages because we are going to continue to have really hot weather, and these things are, some of them are already opening up and they're going to start bolting. So we don't want to lose our cabbages. The question I'm going to answer right now is harvesting and preserving. So how do you harvest and how do you preserve herbs or tea? Woo, the whole thing came up with that. Or like tea leaves. Once you've planted your tea plant or your herbs, you want to let them get established. You don't want to pick from them right away. Once they're setting off really vigorous growth, and you can tell they're really like, their roots are in and established well, they're doing really well growing, you can go ahead and start harvesting. But you never want to harvest more than a third of the plant. As you cut them and as you harvest them, they will continue to grow. If you are going to preserve them, the best way is a freeze dryer, but it's not the only way. You can dry them hanging upside down in a dark place, or you can dry them on your counter. I personally do not recommend drying them in a dehydrator or in an oven or even in the sun because it's way too hot and we'll lose a lot of those medicinal benefits.
So one thing that I am super excited about to get to go ahead and do today is plant my green stalk. We are doing micro dwarf tomatoes in it this year, so excited to try that. They are basically little tiny tomato plants that don't get any bigger than a foot tall. So I just refreshed the soil in here. I'm gonna top dress with worm castings, get these guys in here and get them started. One of the questions that we had asked, I'm really excited about it in regards to the tea garden, is location and layout. The reason I'm excited about that is because, well, I'm a designer, so it works out well. Location is preferably in a sunny spot. Most of these herbal teas are gonna want full sun, especially kind of your, what I would call mainstream herbs, like your mints, your lemon balm, or all of your balms really, bee balm, lemongrass, you know, basil, any of those things, they're gonna want sun. So make sure you pick a sunny spot for them. But there are some things that are gonna prefer or be able to handle wetter conditions, and then some things that really don't wanna be wet at all. Lavender, classic example. It really doesn't like to have an excess amount of water and does better on the drier end rather than the wetter end. But if you have something like bee balm, that's actually can handle dry conditions, but is going to appreciate more water hitting it and even can handle wet soils. So you don't want to plant those two right beside each other. So really what I would encourage you to do to make it an easy answer is look at all of those requirements and make sure you're pairing or putting things together that like the same conditions. And then look at the size to make sure you're not putting a 3 foot tall something right next to something that's going to be more of a ground cover like yarrow that's not going to get overly big or anything like that. Outside of that, I mean, it's completely up to you. It's a blank canvas. Have fun with it. It's like any other garden. You want to make sure you have easy access to each of those plants. So you don't want to do like a 5 foot deep bed that you can't access from the backside. It's really more of one of those gardens where you're gonna, almost like a kitchen garden, where you're gonna run out, grab a few things when you need it, and go back inside, make your cup of tea. So you want it to be easily accessible. So preferably right outside of your door, kitchen door probably. One other thing I would add, when doing mints, mainly your spearmint, peppermint, those type mints, put them in a pot. I would never plant any of that stuff in the ground personally, because once it's in the ground, it's always going to be there. It's going to run. It's going to take over everything and even choke out all of your other plants. So definitely consider putting them in a pot, which is another way you can add interest into your tea garden. If you wanted to get like a color pot or something like that, you can plant that in there, and it adds just a whole nother dimension to the overall look of
I
it.
have harvested all of the cabbages, so now we are weeding. The next thing I want to talk about is pest control. We don't have a lot of problems with herbs and pests because actually a lot of herbs are a pest control in themselves. That's not a huge issue. However, we have had in the past, we've had problems with spider mites. I don't know if you have ever had problems with spider mites before, but they're really, really tiny, and you'll know that they have infested your plant if there's webbing on the plant. The best way to deal with it is to just spray it with a hose, a hard spray on the hose. Obviously, you don't want to damage your plant, you don't want to uproot your plant, but by spraying it, that knocks the spider mites off, it knocks their webbing down. Another great way to get rid of spider mites would be diatomaceous earth. I would only do that if you had a really big problem, because diatomaceous earth is going to kill those spider mites, but it will also kill any beneficial insects that you might have in the plant that you don't see that might be eating those spider mites, like ladybugs or a praying mantis. And while we are here, we went to an herb festival, and the kids were all allowed to pick out something from the festival to bring back. And Joe brought back frosted geranium. I don't know if you guys can see it over here, but the tips are frosted. So one thing about geranium that we learned in purchasing this geranium, because Joe wanted to know if we could use it for tea. What did we discover?
We can't use it for tea.
No, you can use a rose geranium to steep tea, but the other geraniums are toxic. So make sure you do your research. However, geraniums are really good for pest control and mosquitoes. So we can actually steep these leaves and put it in like a balm or something and make our own bug spray or our own bug rub that can keep the mosquitoes away in the summer, huh?
All right, so that about wraps it up. That was a lot of information.
Yes.
Thank you guys for sticking around till this part of the video.
Yeah.
If you're seeing this, you're still here.
Yeah.
So, time for highs and lows.
Highs and lows.
I'll go first. It was one of those weeks where I'm not having a hard time finding a low. So yeah, we'll just go through the sequence of the week. How about that?
Sounds
One of
good.
these you don't even know about.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's great.
So Tuesday, I get home, I hear this like faint beeping, electronic kind of beeping. I'm like, what the heck is that? After trying to track it down, realize it's coming from our crawl space. I discovered that our tankless hot water heater controller is in there. That's what was beeping. I also discovered that it beeps when we're out of gas, which we should not have been out of gas.
Yeah. We
Yeah.
just had a fill up.
Exactly. So I opened up the crawl space door and everything in there's wet. And I was like, what the heck is going on? I was afraid that it was a leak because one of the bathrooms is right above that, because it was wet all above me, like joist, insulation, like all of that. And then I hear another noise, and it's water. Not what you want to hear. It was a leak, not where I thought it was. Thankfully, because where I thought it was would have been up in the walls. This was one of our pipes that runs underneath. It was a hot water pipe, and the connection did not come loose, but it was definitely spraying water.
Awesome.
And I think that because it was hot water, it put extra humidity down there and just got everything soaked. Not what I wanted to discover. The reason we were out of gas is because it had been running long enough to use up all of our gas, which we had just filled
Yes.
about a month ago.
Yeah. Great.
Got that dealt with. Next morning, wake up, go to finish a small project. And this is the part that you don't know. Had a client that decided, hey, I knew what the estimate was, but we're just going to decide to make our own price and pay you what we think is fair, which was not fair because it was barely enough money to cover like all of the expenses.
No. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
They agreed already to this
Price.
So, pre-discussed price.
I'm not about like putting people down, especially on social media, but
Wow.
just the act of this is infuriating. That someone has the mindset to think that it's okay for them to, after the work's completed, to determine what a fair price is. Not taking into consideration what materials and everything else.
That's not okay.
Yeah,
that's
no,
not okay.
definitely not. Was not happy. Was extremely frustrated with that. Infuriated with that. But thankfully, it was a small project. It was small enough for me to just be like, whatever. Like, clearly, money means more to you than it does to me, and just walked away from it.
Ridiculous.
The third low is we discovered like this mass lump, whatever, on Luna's kind of belly, underside, and it is like if there's any kind of pressure applied to it, it does cause her discomfort.
Yeah.
We don't know how much pain, obviously, but
Yeah.
that we think it might be a hernia. We're gonna have a vet come out and check it out. Hernia could go either way. Could be pretty detrimental, or if it heals properly, it goes away and it's no big deal. But definitely not what I wanted to discover.
Especially
on
with
any
the
of our
one
goats.
baby goat that we've kept.
Exactly. And so she's already had to fight for her life. She's doing great.
Yeah, she's
with that.
Yeah.
But now we have this to deal with. So it's just, it felt like one thing after another, and all those hit like one day, next day. So not a fun week. I kind of had to like really think about what my high would be. Joe had a game last night and got the game ball, so that was a high.
That was
proud,
awesome.
proud parent moment. He did great.
Yes, yeah.
My other high, which you don't know this yet because I haven't told you, I was cutting the grass today. Happened to walk by our loquat tree, and we have 2 fruits on it.
What? That's
Yes,
awesome.
and they are almost ripe. The reason that's such a big deal, like 2 fruits, not worth celebrating, right? But the temperatures had gotten so cold that I really didn't think we were going to get any fruit of it this year, because it is a subtropic. Like the plant itself will do fine in our region. It just is really iffy as to whether or not it's going to fruit. And I was determined we weren't getting anything because of how cold we got this winter.
My turn?
Yes, your turn.
Okay. So, my high is that one of them is the girls actually had a different week this week. They were able to dance in a show and kind of be the backup dancing ensemble in the show Descendants, which is really cool because they do a lot. They take drama classes at their studio, but they've never been able to be in like a full-on musical. So this was a cool experience for them. I grew up doing musical theater, so I was really excited that they got to have that experience, and that they were able to kind of take a break from their regular routine, and do something different. So that was really fun. My other high is that I have been able to milk the goats twice a day without any pain in my hands. We got an electric milker last year. I was having a lot of pain in my hands. I couldn't hand milk twice a day. It actually got to the point where I couldn't milk them once a day. And this year, this milking season, it hasn't been an issue. And I've been able to hand milk them, which I definitely prefer.
Yeah.
And my low is probably that because of just a different schedule, and they had rehearsal every night or dance, and then we had competition last weekend. I just really haven't had a lot of time in the garden. Haven't been able to do a lot of homesteading stuff, but I am hoping that moving forward that won't be as much of an issue.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have you back in the garden.
For sure.
So I'm sorry I didn't show you much of our tea garden. It's just kind of not really impressive right now because all the plants are still really small, either coming out of just dormancy or some of them are just newly planted. So we'll be sure to show that through the year.
We'll show it growing.
Yeah,
Touch
definitely.
more on it.
So we thank you guys for joining us. If you have not subscribed, we would love for you to do that. Become a part of our YouTube family. Hope you guys have a great week and be blessed.